What if I told you that some of the most influential religious ideas in Christianity, ideas that have shaped the beliefs of millions of people, ideas that have been used to justify centuries of persecution, what if I told you that some of these weren't actually in the original Bible at all? And what if the passages that were in the Bible were completely misunderstood for nearly 2,000 years? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most controversial topics in religious history. We're going to uncover how certain biblical interpretations became weapons of hatred, how a 19th century preacher invented an entire theology that millions now believe is ancient truth, and how modern scholarship is rewriting everything we thought we knew about these sacred texts. But before we begin, I need to be clear about something. This isn't an attack on faith or religion. This is about understanding history, examining evidence, and learning how interpretation can shape reality in ways that would shock the original authors. So buckle up, this story is going to take some unexpected turns. Let me start with a question that might surprise you. When do you think the rapture doctrine was first taught in Christian churches? If you guessed the 1st century when the New Testament was written, you'd be wrong. If you guessed during the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, still wrong. The answer? 1830, that's right. Less than 200 years ago. For over 1,800 years of Christian history, no church taught that believers would be secretly raptured away before a tribulation period. Not the Catholics, not the Orthodox, not the early Protestants. Nobody. So where did this idea come from, and why do millions of Christians today believe it's a fundamental biblical truth? The story begins with a man named John Nelson Darby, an Irish Anglican priest who had what he claimed was a revolutionary insight into biblical prophecy. But as we'll see, Darby's insight was just the beginning of a much larger pattern, a pattern of how biblical texts have been reinterpreted, sometimes with devastating consequences. But to understand that pattern, we need to go back much further. We need to go back to a single verse that has caused more suffering than perhaps any other sentence ever written. Picture this scene. Jerusalem, around 30 AD. A crowd has gathered outside Pontius Pilate's residence. Jesus of Nazareth stands trial. According to the Gospel of Matthew, when Pilate declares his innocence in Jesus' death, the crowd responds with these words, "His blood be on us and on our children." 25 words in English, fewer in the original Greek, but these words would be used to justify nearly 2,000 years of persecution, violence, and genocide against Jewish people. This passage, known as the blood curse, became the foundation for what's called the deicide charge, the accusation that Jews were collectively responsible for killing God himself. Medieval popes used it to restrict Jewish rights. Martin Luther cited it when he called for burning synagogues. Nazi propagandists referenced it during the Holocaust. But here's what's shocking. Modern biblical scholars believe this scene never actually happened. Dr. Ulrich Luss, one of the world's leading experts on the Gospel of Matthew, calls this passage redactional fiction, meaning it was invented by the author of Matthew's Gospel. It appears in no other Gospel. Mark doesn't have it, Luke doesn't have it, John doesn't have it. So why did Matthew include it? The answer takes us into the complex world of 1st century Judaism, where different Jewish groups were in bitter conflict with each other after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 70 AD. You see, the early Christians weren't a separate religion yet. They were a Jewish sect, arguing with other Jewish sects about who had the correct interpretation of their shared scriptures. These weren't Christians attacking Jews, these were Jews arguing with other Jews. But something changed, and that change would transform these internal family disputes into something. To understand how we got from internal Jewish debates to centuries of anti-Semitism, we need to understand one of the most significant transformations in religious history, how Christianity went from being a Jewish sect to becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire. As Christianity spread beyond its Jewish origins and began attracting Gentile converts throughout the Roman Empire, something crucial happened. The context changed, but the texts stayed the same. Passages that were originally written as arguments between different Jewish groups were now being read by non-Jewish audiences who didn't understand that context. What had been family disputes became ammunition for outsiders to use against the entire Jewish people. This is where we encounter one of the most influential ideas in Christian history, Supersessionism, also known as replacement theology. The basic idea is simple but profound. God's covenant with the Jewish people has been transferred to the Christian church. Christians are now the new Israel. The promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob now belong to followers of Jesus. This wasn't just theology, it was a complete reframing of history and identity, and it had roots in the New Testament itself. The letter to the Hebrews declares that the new covenant has made the first one obsolete. The Gospel of Matthew has Jesus saying, "The kingdom of God will be taken away and given to a people producing its fruits." Early church fathers like Justin Martyr taught that Christians were the true spiritual Israel. Augustine argued that Jews should be preserved as witnesses to Christian truth, but they had forfeited their special relationship with God. For over 1,500 years, this became Orthodox Christian teaching. Jews were seen as a people who had rejected their own Messiah and been replaced by the church in God's plan. But remember our friend John Nelson Darby from the beginning. He was about to turn even this ancient doctrine on its head. By the 1830s, John Nelson Darby had become convinced that traditional Christianity had gotten something fundamentally wrong. He believed that God had two completely separate plans, one for Israel and one for the church, and that these plans had been confused for centuries. Darby developed what he called dispensationalism, the idea that history is divided into distinct periods or dispensations where God deals with humanity in different ways. According to Darby, the current church age was actually a parenthesis in God's plan for Israel. And here's where the rapture comes in. Darby taught that before God resumed his plan for Israel, he would secretly remove all true Christians from the earth in an event he called the rapture. This would clear the stage for a 7-year tribulation period focused on the Jewish people. Now you might be thinking, surely this was based on careful biblical study, right? Surely Darby found this in the scriptures. Well, let's look at the main passage rapture believers cite, 1 Thessalonians 4:17, which talks about believers being caught up together in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Sounds like a rapture, right? But here's what biblical scholars point out. In the ancient world, when a king or emperor visited a city, the citizens would go out to meet him and then escort him back into the city. They didn't disappear with him to some distant location. The language Paul uses here is the same language used to describe these ceremonial processions. The believers aren't being taken away from earth. They're going out to meet Jesus and then returning with him to the renewed earth. But Darby's interpretation caught fire, especially in America. Why? Because it offered something incredibly appealing, an escape from suffering. The Civil War, 2 world wars, the Great Depression. Americans were looking for hope, and the promise that faithful Christians would be raptured away before things got really bad was exactly what many wanted to hear. Preachers like D.L. Moody popularized Darby's ideas. Later, books like The Late Great Planet Earth and the Left Behind series would make rapture theology a multi-million-dollar industry. But here's the kicker, this ancient biblical truth that millions now believe. It's younger than the United States Constitution. So where does this leave us today? How do modern scholars and religious leaders deal with this complex history? The good news is that there's been a remarkable transformation in how many Christians approach these issues. In 1965, the Catholic Church issued a declaration called Nostra Aetate that officially repudiated the idea of collective Jewish guilt for Jesus' death. The Church declared that the accusation could not be made against all the Jews, without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. Prominent theologians like N.T. Wright have argued that using passages like Matthew 27:25 to justify anti-Semitism is a gross distortion of its original meaning. Rowan Williams, former Archbishop of Canterbury, called such interpretations the most corrupt and murderous misreading of the Passion stories. Even within evangelical Christianity, There's growing recognition that replacement theology has caused immense harm. Many churches now teach that God's covenant with the Jewish people remains valid alongside the new covenant through Jesus. But the rapture doctrine? That's proven more persistent. Despite its recent origins, it remains deeply embedded in American evangelical culture. Millions still believe that current events in the Middle East are fulfilling biblical prophecy and that the rapture could happen at any moment. This raises a crucial question. How do we read ancient texts responsibly? How do we avoid the mistakes of the past? The story we've uncovered today teaches us several vital lessons about interpretation, history, and human nature. First, context matters. When we read ancient texts without understanding their historical setting, we can completely misunderstand their meaning. The blood curse in Matthew wasn't originally an attack on all Jewish people. It was part of an internal Jewish debate that got weaponized when the context changed. Second, newer isn't necessarily truer. The rapture doctrine feels ancient and biblical to many people, but it's actually a 19th century innovation. Just because an idea is popular or widespread doesn't mean it has historical roots. Third, interpretation has consequences. The way we read texts doesn't just affect our personal beliefs, it shapes how we treat other people. The history of anti-Semitism shows us how dangerous misinterpretation can be. But perhaps most importantly, this story shows us that scholarship matters. When we approach ancient texts with careful historical and literary analysis, we can uncover their original meaning and avoid the errors of the past. Modern biblical scholarship, using tools like textual criticism, archaeological evidence, and historical context, has revolutionized our understanding of these ancient documents. We now know that the Bible is a complex collection of texts written by multiple authors over centuries, shaped by historical circumstances and community needs. This doesn't diminish the text's significance for believers. If anything, it enhances it by helping us understand what the original authors actually meant to communicate. The story of biblical interpretation is far from over. Each generation must grapple with how to read these ancient texts responsibly, how to learn from the mistakes of the past, and how to ensure that sacred scriptures become sources of wisdom and compassion rather than weapons of hatred. Whether you're a person of faith or simply someone interested in history, the lessons are clear. Question assumptions, seek context, and remember that the way we interpret the past shapes the future we create. What do you think? How should we approach ancient texts in our modern world? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into religious history fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We'll be exploring more hidden histories and challenging assumptions in future videos. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeking truth.